Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Everyday English Channel with Tom and Kate. We're really happy to have you with us today. Before we start, if you enjoy these calm and practical English conversations, you can subscribe to the channel or share this episode with someone who is learning English. It really helps us, and we really appreciate it. Today we're going to talk about something very common in everyday conversations: free time and hobbies. This is a topic that comes up all the time when you talk to people, especially in informal situations. People often ask what you do outside of work, how you spend your time, or what you enjoy doing. In my case, I like to organize my free time in a structured way. I don't just wait and see what happens. I usually plan activities in advance. For example, I might decide that I want to exercise, read, or work on something personal. So if someone asks me what I do in my free time, I would say something like, I usually go to the gym, I read a bit, and sometimes I work on personal projects. It's quite clear and organized.
My approach is very different. I don't really plan my free time. I prefer to keep it open and decide in the moment. So if someone asks me the same question, I would probably say something like, "It depends," or "I just relax," or "I see what I feel like doing." Sometimes I watch something, sometimes I meet friends, and sometimes I do nothing special. And I think a lot of people recognize themselves in that. Free time is not always structured, and that's perfectly fine.
Yes, and that's something important to understand. When people talk about their free time, they don't give long explanations. They usually give a few examples, and that's enough to create a conversation. You might hear things like, I like going to the gym, or I enjoy reading, or I spend time with friends. These sentences are simple, but they clearly express what the person enjoys.
And very often people don't even use full sentences. They might say, just relaxing, or watching a series, or going out sometimes. It's short, but it works perfectly in conversation.
Another thing I notice is that people often use the word usually when they talk about hobbies. They say, I usually go running, or I usually stay home, or I usually meet friends on weekends. It helps describe something that is part of your routine without needing to be exact.
Yes, and I use that a lot, especially because my free time is not always the same. I might say, I usually stay home during the week, but on weekends I go out more. That kind of sentence is very natural and very common.
Another question that comes up all the time is, what do you like doing in your free time?
Yes, that's probably one of the most common questions.
And again, the answer is simple. You don't need to think too much. You just say what you enjoy. For me, I might say, I like reading and going to the gym. It's direct and clear.
I would probably say something like, I like watching movies and spending time with friends. And sometimes I add something like, nothing too special, just to keep it relaxed.
And that's something interesting. People often downplay their hobbies. They don't try to make them sound impressive.
Yes, they keep it natural. Because in real conversations, the goal is not to impress, it's to connect.
Another thing that happens a lot is that people ask follow-up questions.
Yes, like when you say you enjoy something.
For example, if I say I like going to the gym, someone might ask, how often do you go? Or, do you go in the morning or in the evening?
And that's how the conversation develops.
Exactly. You start with a simple answer, and then you add more detail step by step.
And what's important is that at every step, the language stays simple.
Yes, always simple.
That's the key.
When I think about hobbies more specifically, I realize that people often group them into a few simple categories, even if they don't say it directly. You have physical activities like sports, more relaxed activities like watching something or reading, and then social activities like spending time with friends. In my case, I clearly lean toward structured activities. I like having hobbies that feel productive, or at least consistent. Going to the gym is a good example. It's not just something I do when I feel like it, it's something I plan during the week. So if someone asks me about it, I would naturally say, I go to the gym 3 or 4 times a week. It's precise, and it shows that it's part of my routine. I might also mention reading, but again, in a structured way. I don't just read randomly. I choose what I want to read, and I try to make time for it regularly. So I would say something like, I try to read a bit every evening. That kind of sentence shows intention without being complicated.
I see hobbies in a much more flexible way. I don't really organize them, and I don't like putting pressure on my free time. For me, hobbies are more about how I feel in the moment. If I feel tired, I'll do something relaxing. If I feel more social, I'll go out or meet friends. So if someone asks me about my hobbies, I don't give a very structured answer. I might say, I like watching movies, going out sometimes, and just relaxing. It's not very precise, but it reflects reality. My free time changes a lot depending on the day or the week, and I think many people speak like that. They don't describe a system, they describe possibilities.
Yes, and what's interesting is that both approaches use the same type of language. Even if one is structured and the other is flexible, the sentences stay simple. Another thing I notice is how people talk about sports. Even people who are not very active still mention something. You hear things like, I go running sometimes, or I play football with friends, or I try to stay active. These sentences are very common because they don't sound too strong. They leave space for flexibility.
I use that kind of phrasing a lot, especially words like sometimes or from time to time. I might say, I go for a walk sometimes, or I work out from time to time. It allows me to talk about an activity without making it sound like a strict habit. And it feels more natural because not everything needs to be regular.
Another common situation is when people talk about relaxing activities. This is probably the easiest topic in conversations because everyone can relate to it. People say things like, I watch series, or I listen to music, or I just relax at home. These are very simple sentences, but they are used all the time. In my case, I don't spend too much time on passive activities, but I still mention them when I talk to people. I might say, I watch something in the evening, just to keep the conversation balanced.
I probably mention those activities more because they are a big part of my free time. I might say, I watch movies, or I spend time on my phone, or I just stay home and relax, and I think that's very realistic. Not everyone has very active or structured hobbies, and that's completely normal.
Another thing that comes up quite often is talking about social activities. People say things like, I meet friends, or I go out on weekends, or I spend time with my family. These are very common expressions, and they are very easy to use. In my case, I plan these moments in advance. I might say, I usually meet friends on Saturday, or I try to see my family every weekend. It gives a clear idea of how often it happens.
I describe it in a more flexible way. I might say, I see friends when I can, or I go out sometimes. It's less precise, but it reflects how things actually happen. And again, both ways sound completely natural in English.
What's important in all these situations is that people don't try to list everything they do. They just give a few examples.
Yes, just enough to start a conversation.
And then the other person reacts or asks more questions.
Exactly, and that's how the conversation grows.
Something I find interesting when people talk about hobbies is that they don't always talk about what they do. They often talk about what they like and what they don't like. That's a very natural part of the conversation because it shows personality. In my case, I clearly prefer activities that feel useful or productive. I enjoy things where I feel like I'm improving or progressing. So I might say something like, I like going to the gym because it helps me stay focused, or I enjoy reading because I learn something from it. At the same time, there are things I don't really enjoy. For example, I don't spend much time just watching random content. So if the topic comes up, I might say, I'm not really into watching TV all day, or I prefer doing something active. These sentences are simple, but they clearly show preferences.
I think I'm almost the opposite. I don't always look for productivity in my free time. For me, free time is really about disconnecting and doing something easy. So when I talk about what I like, I say things like, I like watching movies, or I enjoy just relaxing at home, or I like spending time with friends. These are very simple sentences, but they reflect what I actually do. And when I talk about what I don't like, I usually keep it just as simple. I might say, I don't really like planning everything, or I'm not a big fan of strict routines. It's not very detailed, but it's enough for the other person to understand.
Another thing that comes up quite often is talking about trying new hobbies. People don't just talk about what they already do, they also mention things they would like to try. In my case, I usually approach new activities in a structured way. I don't try things randomly, I think about it, I plan it, and then I start. So I might say, I'd like to start learning something new, or I want to try a new activity, maybe something creative. These sentences are very common, and they show intention without needing a lot of vocabulary.
I approach that very differently. I don't plan new hobbies in advance. It usually happens by chance. I hear about something, or a friend suggests it, and I just try it. So I would say something like, I'd like to try something new. Or, I'm thinking about starting something, but I'm not sure yet. It's less structured, but it feels more natural for me.
And that's something you hear a lot in real conversations. People are not always certain. They use expressions like maybe, I'm thinking about, or I might try. These words make the sentence softer and more flexible.
Yes, and they make the conversation more real. Not everything is decided or planned. Sometimes people are just exploring ideas.
Another interesting part of these conversations is when people talk about how often they do something.
Yes, frequency is a big part of talking about hobbies.
You hear things like, I go to the gym 3 times a week, or I watch movies on weekends, or I see my friends quite often. These are simple ways to describe habits.
I usually keep it less precise. I say things like, I go from time to time, or I do it when I can, or not very often. It's more flexible, and it reflects how my routine actually works.
And again, both ways are very common. Some people are precise, others are more general, but the language is always simple.
One more thing I notice is that people often explain why they like something.
Yes, they add a short reason.
For example, I like running because it helps me relax, or I enjoy reading because it's quiet. These explanations are very short, but they add meaning to the conversation.
I do that sometimes, especially when I want to make the conversation more personal. I might say, I like watching movies because it helps me switch off, or I like going out because I enjoy being around people.
And that's usually enough. You don't need long explanations, just a simple reason,
And the other person understands immediately.
simple ideas, simple sentences, natural flow. And that's what makes these conversations easy to follow.
When you look at all these conversations together, what stands out is how easy it is to talk about free time and hobbies without using complex English. You don't need long explanations or advanced vocabulary. You just connect a few simple ideas and speak naturally. In my case, if someone asks me about my free time, I usually give a short and structured answer. I might say, during the week, I focus on a few activities like going to the gym or reading. On weekends, I try to relax a bit more or meet friends. That kind of answer is clear and easy to follow. If the conversation continues, I add details step by step. I don't try to explain everything at once. I might say when I usually do these activities or why I like them, but I keep each part simple. It creates a natural flow instead of a long explanation.
My version is built the same way, but it sounds more flexible. I don't organize my free time in advance, so I describe it based on how it actually happens. I might say, after work, I usually just relax, and on weekends, I do whatever I feel like. It's not very precise, but it reflects reality. If someone shows interest, I add a few examples. I might mention watching movies, going out, or staying at home. I don't try to list everything. I just give a few ideas that represent my habits. That's usually enough to keep the conversation going. What I find important is that I don't try to invent anything when I speak. I just describe my real life. That makes speaking easier, because I already know what I want to say.
Another thing that makes these conversations natural is how people connect their hobbies to their daily routine. They don't treat free time as something separate. They include it in their day. For example, I might say, after work, I go to the gym, or in the evening, I read for a bit. These sentences are simple, but they clearly show how hobbies fit into everyday life. And even when I summarize my free time, I use the same logic. I give a general idea first, then I add one or two examples. I don't try to be detailed or impressive, I just try to be clear.
I do exactly the same, but with different activities. I might say, after work, I usually just rest, or in the evening I watch something. It's very simple, but it reflects how I spend my time. And I think that's the key point. These conversations are not about listing hobbies or using complex sentences. They are about sharing something real in a simple way. Most people use the same patterns again and again. They say things like I usually, I like, I go, I watch, or I spend time. These structures are easy to use, and they are enough to build a full conversation. The more you use them, the more natural it becomes. You stop thinking about the structure and you just speak.
And that's really the idea to remember. Talking about free time is one of the easiest ways to practice English because the content is already part of your life. You don't need to create anything new. You just describe what you already do using simple and natural sentences.
Before we finish, thank you very much for spending this time with us today.
We hope this conversation helps you feel more comfortable talking about your free time and hobbies in English.
If you enjoyed this episode, you can subscribe to the channel or share it with someone who is learning English. It really helps us grow, and we truly appreciate your support.
Join us in the next episode for another calm and practical English conversation.
Thanks again for listening.
And remember, keep speaking English every day.